Welcome. This is Panic Consulting's workshop, and I'm Frank Conkling. Today, you get a relief from me talking a whole lot. We're going to have Joshua Carlson. He's the cadastral analyst from Kendall County. He's going to talk to us about some of what they're doing with before and after maps and tracking changes that occur in the parcel fabric. And so I think I'm going to turn it over to Josh. I don't think we're going to go through the normal introductions. Just be aware, if you're here right now and you have a question, Chris with Panic Consulting is tracking the chat window. And if you will put a question up there, he'll do it. And I'll try to go and ask any questions that you might be asking beforehand. Josh, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to you.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see. Share. Okay. See things up here. All right. So hey, where? Okay. So I had to, of course, restart Pro real quick, but so I just wanted to go over what we're doing for before and after. We call them change records. I'm sure you all have your own terms for it, but you know, basically when you process some kind of transaction, there's a record of that. And we think that anyone who's curious and says, well, what did it look like before? And why does it look the way it does now? We should make that information available to people. Oh gosh, let me see if I've got access to it. I can show you what our change records used to look like. Now, I don't know how many of you actually do this kind of thing. Our change records, we give them out to our assessors who need to go out and get fresh assessments for new parcels. And we also give these out to the clerk's office if they need to update a tax code or something like that. But often, if a member of the public was looking for one, they were just sitting on an on-premise server, no public access of any kind. Let's just open one randomly. But this is what they used to look like. And I don't know, maybe you guys have something similar in your county or you used to. Parcels added. Let's find a more recent one. And we had a person on staff back in these days who was hand typing these. I'll find one with a map. Those were kind of glorious in their complete and utter lack of utility. Okay, so here we go. It's, you know, here's the document number, the date it happened, parcels to be removed, parcels to be added. Oh, no map. Well, it's probably okay. More just
Josh, let me interrupt you real quickly. And I just want to make sure I've got somebody in, Pat Walker just noted and said he can't see the screen. Can everybody else see the screen? It seems to be viewable on my end, so I just want to make sure. Okay.
It's viewable on my end as well.
Perfect. Thank you. Just wanted to make sure. So
here's one with a map. These, I love these. Okay. So we know parcel 002 was deleted, parcel 006 was created, but any Where's Waldo fans, you know, spot parcel 002 on here.
So were these maps, were they just printed out?
They were just printed out. If the cadastral person at the time remembered, you would print it out before processing the document. And then you would print it out after processing it. And it was kind of hard to tell, like, what's changing. The aerials, they don't help. And you had to come into the office and ask someone to, like, pull up that piece of paper. So a lot of times it wasn't very useful. We moved to using the ArcGIS Pro Parcel Fabric. And as you know, if you're using them, everything is tied together with records. Record has a global ID, and then every line, it's taking a second here. Every line, point, parcel, and what have you, they all have attributes panel, the created and retired by record fields on there. So because of that, you know, we can actually say per record what happened there. So I'm just gonna go through the process of using the Pro Parcel Fabric to make something that is digital and interactive.
So while you're doing that, I'm going to go in and sort of fill in here a little bit. So with the Parcel Fabric, as you just said, Josh, that all records in there have a global ID. And as something gets added to the Parcel Fabric on any of those parcel types, which are being tracked by the Parcel Fabric, it gets marked that it's associated with that record. And anything gets deleted or geometry gets modified, it gets marked as retired by record. So they are all linked together through that record polygon. And that's the key to making sure that the Parcel Fabric maintains not just current, but also historic. Correct?
Correct. And so our records features, why we have so many 2018s at the top. You know, so we've got our records here. I'm making a little dashboard list. People might be interested in what kind of record it was. And we've actually added some fields to our records layer in the Parcel Fabric because I want to know when it's recorded, but the township assessor needs to know when it was processed because you know, it gets recorded at the end of the year 2021, but assessment books are closed, or there's some other problem with the document that that holds it up. That document may not actually be processed until the following tax year or even the following tax year. So knowing that the document was recorded in 2021 doesn't really help us if is not null. There we go.
So one other question for you, and before we move on,
yeah.
What does the domain for your record type look like? Are you looking at basically deeds and easements or subdivisions, or what does your domain look like?
Yeah, our domain is very simplified. Let's see if I can find a record here. All my reference layers on, all my records on. But you know, we keep it simple just because for our end users, they don't care if it was a warranty deed. They don't care if it was a sheriff's deed. Deed is just, it means it's basically any kind of deed that is transferring ownership. We have right-of-way, which is anything that is specifically dealing with creating or vacating right-of-way features. Same thing with subdivision. We'll have, you know, just a separate record type for that so that people know, okay, this is going to be bigger. It doesn't actually transfer ownership. It's just splitting up the input parcels and creating lots and all of that stuff.
And if I remember correctly, you've got somewhere around 40,000 parcels. Is that correct?
We've got closer to, it's in the 50s as far as active parcels. I think the feature class, including historics, is in the 60s now.
Okay.
But we also have these like we call them non-recorded because they aren't recorded with the recorder's office. The record number, and I know not all counties have this, but our recorder's office makes these things available digitally. So we we can just use that document number and it should pull it up. But that non-recorded document type. So what do we have? This is a warranty deed. Murfields to IDOT. So that's our, should that be? Look, we've spotted an error. This should actually be a right-of-way type. I'll have to see who processed it. But anyway, non-recorded stuff, the assessor's office does allow people to bring in a plat of survey and just split their own parcel. If they're not transferring ownership, they can split it just with a survey, or they can take two contiguous parcels in the same tax code and combine them. So those don't go through the recorder's office. And so that we make up a name for it, but non-recorded is just a flag to whoever's viewing it that you're not going to find this on the recorder's website. But let me do something useful with this dashboard. I'm going to make a map. What do we call it? Parcel reference map. I'll make sure this has everything. It might not be the map I want. I should have written it down, but let's see. Oh, it's looking in my maps. That's probably part of the problem. Okay, we've got our cadastre change record map. So I'm just gonna include this. And this is not all of our cadastral features. It's just everything that is either associated with a record as having retired it or created it. So
Josh,
like, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt. We do have a question in the chat.
Sure.
Is
Go
your
ahead.
non-recorded naming scheme arbitrary, or is there a system to it?
There is a system to it. Typically, there's really only a couple kinds of non-recorded things. It's either an owner request where they've sent in a form, or it's a supervisor of assessments request where our supervisor of assessments tells us, this parcel needs to split to be compliant with something, or this leasehold parcel can be retired. And so we just put OR or SR. The first 8 digits are, four characters for the year, month, day, day. 2 characters for what kind it is, and then just two integers, just in case we get multiple of the same kind on a given day. I doubt we'll ever see more than 99 come in on a single day, but we wanted to leave plenty of room. So that is the naming scheme with those non-recorded. So this one was July 6th, 2022. It was the first owner's request of the day, and evidently the only one. We'll get back to that. So obviously I want to, when I select something on here, I want to zoom to it, and I'm going to filter parcels where the document number matches the retired by document. And I'll turn on this render only when filtered. If you're on the latest version of Enterprise or ArcGIS Online, that makes it so the map isn't all cluttered before you click on stuff. And we might as well filter the records as well. Actually, that should be, it's not gonna let me do that. All right, we'll do that. So now when I click on one of these records, it'll jump me over to it. And this would be the before map. This is showing me things that are associated to this based on their retired status. We can see, yeah, retired by this document, and other details. I'll go ahead and duplicate this though. Let's say this is before. And this one is after. I'm going to do a couple other things here. I change the map here. I want to change the map there so that they stay in sync. That way, whichever one I move, the other one moves with it. Not always perfectly, because they're not quite the same size. That's all right. So then I'm going to take this, I'm going to add another action. And this time, I'm going to filter the parcels on the aftermap, where the document number matches the created by document. Again, rendering only when filtered. And we'll do that for records too. Now I could do this for all the other feature types, but for the sake of simplicity and demoing, I'm not going to subject you all to that much clicking. It can be tedious if you use the ArcGIS Python API. You can actually configure an entire dashboard just using Python. So if you've got something repetitive like setting up these filter links, you can actually code that out. That's a totally other thing, but just know that it does not have to be tedious if you're comfortable with a bit of scripting. Okay, but now I've got, oh, you know what? I'm missing one thing. I need people to be able to see what it is. Doesn't help us if we don't know which map is which.
Right.
Oops. Can't type today. All right. So this is just a really simple example, but now let's go through here and pick out a deed. Click it, zooms, and it shows me that, oh gosh, you know, we got to go back further. This one, I know this one, it's not a good example. And this is why I probably should have had filters on for those other features too. But you can see on here, well, maybe.
So it's got a different number in there.
Yeah, that would be the parcel number. I'm trying to find one that doesn't have. Okay, here's a great one. And let's move before, because we read left to right. Makes a little more sense this way. So here we've got this parcel 019, and that was before. And then when this record was processed, it turned into these three parcels. And if I looked up the deed, you know, I could turn this into a hyperlink. I'd see that it was deeding off this, and those are just the remainder pieces. So this is a very bare bones example of what our township assessors are using when they look at stuff. So, so I've got parcel 005 getting split into 6, 7, and 8. There's a future right of way, but it's not happening yet. So they're just splitting the property, but not dedicating it to the right of way yet.
So can I ask you
Yeah.
to go into a little bit more detail? Because it looks like the key to this that you've done is basically all contained in the records feature class, and that you've gone and expanded the attribution for those. Can you sort of show us what the additional attribution is that you put on here?
I can show you a few different things. So I should mention what we're seeing here. This is not the parcel fabric. It's actually a copy that we make, and that's a whole other process. It's just, there's a Python script that dumps any changes to our portal every night. And that's because most people, they don't care about all of these different fields. on the parcels. They just want to know the PIN and when it was effective, and then they want all the assessment details, which aren't showing up here. But also, we're the only ones who use the Parcel Fabric data set. And so by moving the public facing stuff to a copy layer that's just living in the portal data store, we can just turn that database off at the end of the day, which, you know, saves on, it's a cloud machine, so it just saves on compute time and costs that way.
Right.
But,
I was gonna make a comment that if I remember correctly, you have everything up in the cloud.
yeah.
And so that since you're paying for the number of minutes that it's actually active, you turn it off at night and
We
you
just turn it
save on
off.
costs.
And then the data store with hosted layers, that has plenty of detail for what our end users need.
So
and
that hosted layer that you're doing out there,
Mhm.
again, a little bit more detail. Are you serving it out as a map service, or are you actually creating a replica, or are you doing ETL, or how are you actually putting that in place?
Yeah, the ETL process is just a Python script I mentioned, but you can see it's got, you know, just the polygons. We do have a version of this for the lines, but most people don't even want those. They just want to see the shape. So this is just a hosted feature service. But the benefit is, you know, the stuff that's hosted on the data store, it does perform really well. And so I don't have to worry about database access or how many machines are on, because the data store is always on. And then I can just manage things like view layers here in the web platform, because you know, not everyone on my staff is comfortable going and creating database views, even in Pro. But being able to create a view layer here is nice, because then I can have my certified parcels per year, or maybe a subset of features or fields for open data stuff. But you know, if we look at something on here, so like one of these parcels, it's got a lot of stuff that the Parcel Fabric doesn't have. And frankly, this stuff doesn't belong in the Parcel Fabric. It's from our assessments database. But then we have other things. One of the complaints people have about the Parcel Fabric is when I have a parcel feature, what I get as my created by record is just a global ID. It's meaningless. And so people have asked for human readable versions of that. And so we have attribute rules that will just pipe in the record name and the recorded date whenever something's edited.
And that's just using a feature set by relate, right?
Yeah. But as far as some of the other stuff, you know, even though we have, you know, 60,000 parcel polygons, and that's just parcels, there's all the other stuff too. Any given day, I'm only editing, you know, if I'm cleaning up something or creating a subdivision, I'm creating, you know, a lot of parcels, but maybe only in the hundreds. And so, you know, a traditional like truncate and append or overwrite process, you know, 58,000 of those parcels didn't change. They didn't need to be overwritten. So one of my favorite Python libraries is Pandas, which is built into the ArcGIS Python API. What we do is we query out the features from the actual Parcel Fabric and just the fields that we're interested in moving to this hosted copy. Then we query out the corresponding layer in the hosted copy, and Pandas does a great, not you Pandas, but Python Pandas,
Right.
Has comparison functions. So we just take the two and compare them and identify of the 60 some odd thousand rows, which ones have changed, which ones are missing from the destination, meaning they're adds, and which ones are missing from the source, meaning they're deletes. And so we can quickly identify maybe the 400 or fewer rows that actually need updating on any given day.
And I recall us talking about this in your last presentation, which was a little bit over a year ago, But I also have a request here. Would you mind sharing the Python script real quick?
Yeah, I can. It's a bit much, but
If I remember correctly, you showed us that scripting in notebooks
yeah,
last time.
yeah, it was in a notebook. Let's see, I can. So if I'm updating the cadaster, it's, I have a separate toolbox of things. But, I just have my globals, right? I have the fields that I don't want to come into my hosted layers. And then I take the feature layer collections. Instead of getting the item, I want the feature layer collection for my actual fabric, parcel fabric, and then my hosted polygons, and then the hosted lines. And I just set those each to a variable. So then all I'm doing, I keep track of the last time that every layer was updated. So then I just look for, using the last updated field, anything that was updated in the past 7 days. Because it's possible for something to be edited 3 days ago, but then that user didn't post their edits to default until today. So I need to have kind of a long enough look back to catch things that weren't posted until today, but were edited prior to that.
And do you have standard procedures that say you will recompose at least once a week?
Yeah, if something's going to go longer than that, we all know about it. And frankly, if something is going to take longer than that, odds are it's going to be edited before that happens anyway. But that's not the only thing that catches our features. Can I zoom this in and turn this off? So, we query out, it all starts with the records, right? We query out our records for anything that was updated in the past 7 days and is not an import. So we filter out those because those aren't real records. And then we just rename stuff. That was the other key here, is in this hosted copy, everything has a GUID field that corresponds to the feature in the parcel fabric. So if I went in and updated the name of this lot, it's going to pick that up as an edit and it'll fix it. So having that stable link. So it just queries that in as a data frame, drops the stuff I don't care about. And then, let's see, it's been a while since I walked through this verbally. But then, this is the comparison. It's going to pull the hosted records and then it's going to compare them. And
so that the pandas compare looks at both geometry and attribution, correct?
It can compare whatever you want it to. And that's not in here exactly, because some of the stuff I'm doing was big enough that I just put it in a separate set of scripts, because I want to use some of these functions in multiple different operations.
More modular approach, right?
But so like this get changes function that I use a bunch. This is the one where it's taking, two services, an update timestamp, and your records, and it's going to identify those rows and spit it out. Let me get back to the master here. But yeah, so the big thing that this is doing though is, I have records that were updated, and obviously if I changed the name or the date on a record, that's going to matter to any of the parcels or other features associated with it. So when I am getting my changes, that get changes function, it's also going to use the records data frame. and it's going to look for any parcels associated with any records that were edited. So maybe I didn't update parcel A, but I updated the record that retired it. Well, I still want to pull this in so that I apply those correct updates.
Right. Right.
Another thing this is doing, that get associated records function, and I could have collapsed this all into like a one-liner, but I like to keep some things in the main script for debugging. But get associated records, that is what takes the name, the timestamp of the record, and pipes it in here as like human readable stuff.
Right.
Instead of a GUID. So those are the things that the script is doing. And then it is just adding or updating or deleting as the case may be. And then it just does that for every layer in the hosted thing. And then it updates some logs that I have and just says it either worked or it didn't or what have you.
We have a question that's really deep in the weeds, right?
All right.
So your source information, which is your parcel fabric, which is stored up in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
The question is your source information in SDE?
Yes.
What actually database do you have up there in the cloud that you're using?
We use Postgres. So everything's in Postgres. It's served as a feature service so that we can take advantage of branch versioning. But I mean, there's no reason that this same thing couldn't point to a geodatabase.
Right.
Pandas and the ArcGIS Python API can read in a data frame from just a file location as well. So the the nice thing about having this isn't really about the change record at this point, but I mean, the nice thing about having our parcels, and everything else sort of separated this way is that I can have these other fields. So all of this stuff, tax status, property class, how much they're billed, who owns it, random notes, which a lot of times have all kinds of weird stuff in it. Those go through a similar process where it's actually just taking a query, and it's taking a query from the DevNet, our assessment database, and performing a similar operation where, on this side of things, it's just looking at parcel fabric attributes and update timestamps to identify changes. But then when we have our, our copying assessment data in, it uses the same compare functions, but it's only using those fields, and it ignores any edits to parcel fabric things. So, so in that way, maybe there's a parcel no one's edited in the parcel fabric for over a year, but the owner changes. It'll still catch that, and it won't arbitrarily catch geometry changes because it's only interested in a subset of fields. But we do that just because the assessment data gets updated every day someone's working, so that just has to run on its own schedule. But the parcel fabric stuff, that runs as we need it to. It's on a schedule, but a different schedule because our workflow is not the same as the assessments folks. But yeah, get to know Python pandas. You can do some pretty crazy stuff. I know in the latest version of Enterprise, the ArcGIS Python API lets you do append, but I haven't quite figured that one out. I prefer this method anyway. But anyway, so that's how we get those created and retired by documents and timestamps into our parcel features, where ordinarily you'd have to access those through a relate or through an arcade expression. Now you could still set something up like this, just using the global ID and the GUID fields, if you wanted. But So
I find it very interesting that, so many of our clients focus so much on the parcel fabric and that structure itself. And the approach that you've taken is that the parcel fabric itself only serves as the beginning point of this
Yeah.
entire component, that you actually are using that for geometry and for collecting that initial, change detection type of information. Then you're all putting it all over on hosted services where it's much easier for you to go and create views and to manipulate what it looks like, and you're using Python and pandas to get over to there.
Yeah.
And that all of this really isn't driven by the parcel fabric, it's driven by data that's produced at the parcel fabric.
Right. And we prefer it that way because if I'm upgrading the parcel fabric or I need to work on the schema, I just need to make sure 2 other people aren't using it, and I can just pull it offline, make the changes and republish it. So it gives me a lot more freedom to manipulate and manage that data set independently from what's going on in our web layers, which is nice. Because there are times when I'll realize, oh, I wish this value was or was not in the parcel fabric domain. I can just go do that. I don't have to wait until after hours because some appraiser might be looking at my parcels online.
Right.
But so I wanted to show everyone what the real digital change record is. This was just an example of like how to get the essential, show me an interactive web map of before and after. And it's not hard, and you wouldn't need this weird hosted copy to do it. You can do it with just the standard parcel fabric as well. But we have what we call the digital change record. We've got this help page that no one ever reads. So we'll just never show this again. It's not my favorite map. It's not my favorite application. But we built this thing. Every tab in here is purpose built for specific end users. And they've asked for certain things that stylistically I wouldn't do, but compromise. And sometimes what you compromise on is good design. But it's the same idea, right? We've got our records sorted by when they were processed. And this is in Experience Builder, just so we can have tabs here. But it works the same way. You click on a record, it's going to zoom over to it and show you, oh, these ones again. We can't look at those ones. That's we're correcting a long-standing error, and I think our staff person put the wrong stuff on the record. But yeah, you click on a record, it zooms over to it somewhere. I'm seeing 2 different places.
There you go.
I
think the aftermath was correct. Okay.
Josh, before we begin, we do have a question in the chat.
Yeah.
Do you have some of your applications that are published public that people can see?
Yes. You can actually play around with this, and let's see, how do I open the chat window?
You should see down on the Zoom toolbar, you should see the chat.
I'm sorry. Where's my
That's
Zoom
okay.
toolbar? Oh, the Zoom toolbar ended up on the other screen. I see.
Okay.
Megan, you're here. Awesome. Megan sent the link. So yeah.
Thank you, Megan.
Perfect.
That's one of the nice
Thank
things
you.
about Experience Builder, the developer edition anyway, is let me collapse this down to one desktop. It stops jumping around like that. One of the benefits of Experience Builder is being able to deploy to a custom URL. So, just like with the parcel fabric, being able to make changes without interrupting anyone's use of things. Can I get this toolbar to keeps dropping that? But anyway, I can make changes to this. People don't have to update the URL that they're going to, but so as before, we have our parcels, the before and after, but people wanted more details, so we can have per parcel details of retired and created, and then just a little button that says, okay, well, which one is this? Because if it's a subdivision, there might be 100 parcels in this list, and they're going to want to know which one in particular. So having this little map built in, they can toggle back and forth and see stuff. For a more complicated change, that's definitely useful. Come on, zoom in. It's Experience Builder's a little less responsive than dashboards. That's one of my major complaints, but it makes up for it in functionality. So our township assessors, they might only cover Big Grove Township. So that's one of the fields we added to our records purely for the township assessors, because often they only want to know about changes that happen in their township. And they might want, they checked it all the way through July. So they only want changes that happened since July 31st. Well, okay, Big Grove Township, they're good. They don't have anything to keep track of.
Interesting, Josh. I did something very similar to this recently in New Mexico, where we had appraisers and they were looking for only their service areas that they were looking for, and they wanted to know what tax years they were looking for and which ones they had to visit during the same thing. And you're right, something like this is perfect for it when you use Experience Builder.
Yeah.
Or even the old web app builder you could do the same sort of thing.
Yeah, but now we'll get into stuff you couldn't do with Web App Builder.
Right, right.
Which is these other pages. So, parcels aren't the only things that change that people care about. Our clerk's office needs to know. Let's see. Megan's handling some of the questions. We just have a standard license of everything. Experience Builder Developer Edition is freely available. It's not part of a developer license or anything. So you can make kind of neat looking stuff yourself, but if you have a standard license, you should have access to it. But so here we are, the clerk's office, they just need to know when things were annexed or de-annexed. And so they'll go to this one and they need to know, okay, Village of Plainfield annexed this on this date. Here's the ordinance number, the associated document, and then specifically the 2 pins that were involved, because they need to know that too. And if it's a lot of pins, giving them the ability to export that for whatever they need to do.
So Josh, you just loaded up a question for me.
Yeah.
Do you keep your jurisdictional or annexation areas in the parcel fabric, or are they just separate feature classes outside? Right.
Interesting you should ask.
Yes.
And the answer. The answer is we do and we don't. We have 2 parcel fabrics. We have our cadastre parcel fabric, which is parcels, subdivisions, lots, and right-of-ways. Anything that's going to not that incorporated areas don't, but these 4 layers are important to ownership, to tax maps and things like that. Where the ordinance parcel fabric, these are kind of different things. We wanted to leverage the abilities of the parcel fabric with respect to tracking historic changes and having subtypes and good topology between layers, but we wanted it for things that are driven by ordinances as opposed to deeds and subdivision plats. So this is our ordinance fabric. The other thing too is if you're working with things that are really big in the parcel fabric, unless you have the benefit of starting from scratch, your incorporated area is probably pretty large. And we found that if we were editing anything that touched an incorporated area, the topology would take ages to validate our edits before it would process it. and it was just getting in the way of doing good work. So we took the incorporated areas out of our regular parcel fabric and said, we can track these better separately. And then we got to thinking, well, what else do we want to track that we aren't yet? So things like zoning, people want to know, when was a special use permit issued? When was it revoked? What kind of zoning was it? When did it change? These are things that we weren't tracking, and frankly, don't make as much sense to have all in with your full parcel fabric. Because some of these things, you know, they get recorded differently, they get processed differently. And so we just wanted we wanted to control the parcel fabric domains differently for these things. But
just to let me comment on that, you're exactly right. Such a smart way to do this, because not only do you have the topology issues when you integrate these large areas together with the smaller parcel and cadastral type areas, but you also can run into, and we've had several of our clients do this, run into spatial indexing issues, where you've got this mixture of very tiny parcels and very large parcels, and you'll have problems rebuilding and maintaining a really efficient spatial index on them. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's fine. So this is how we're keeping track of those kinds of things. But just like with the cadastral features, there is a script that goes through this and pipes them into a hosted layer, which is what we're seeing here. And it does the same thing, because I already built the tool for one. And so, oops. I'm not going to have the dates on here. That's not a great example. So it follows the same format as copying out the stuff from the cadaster. It's just slightly different fields. But this way our clerk can go through and just see exactly what's changing about the. I'm gonna have to check on the dates. I know they're in there, but must be missing. Happens, but they're less concerned about the dates, because that's really in the ordinance parcel fabric. That is this date. When it's recorded is when the thing happened. We didn't have to wait for an assessment or taxes or anything. It's annexed. There it is. But, you know, having that visual reference, but the clerk's office, they could care less about zoning. So we put zoning in its own tab. And, you know, the taxing bodies, those mostly, you know, they're doing a one feature operation. They're either annexing this new piece or they're de-annexing this other piece. But rarely do we have situations where there needs to be a before and after. But zoning, we do care. So we'll go to this document. It's a zoning petition 21. Having some Zoom issues here. Let's see. Okay, here's a simpler one. It's going from A1 to R1. And some of these older ones, we don't have all the pins properly assigned. But there's a special use permit getting added. So there was nothing before that.
So interesting that you've decided to apply this same sort of procedure, not just on the cadastral elements, but also these other regulatory elements. And you recognized how valuable it was to show people this and suddenly use this concept of before and after to allow other people to see what these things look like and what changes have occurred on them. It really, I applaud it. Great idea.
Thanks. You know,
but it also shows the reuse of code.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Maps didn't catch the other update. So, you know, this is our zoning, I forget his title, zoning coordinator, maybe. but, or planner, senior planner.
Senior planner. There you go. Thanks, Megan.
Senior planner, he was, he was asking at one point about keeping track of when different zoning types were established and revoked. He told us that actually special use permits in our old zoning layer, we would have treated those as a different type of zoning. It would be A1-SU. But he clarified that actually it's always A1, and then the special use sort of sits on top of that. But the way the data was being tracked before didn't allow for that kind of nuance. And so now that if I was in the full zoning layer, I'd be able to click on this and see, okay, it's got a special use permit established by this document on this date, but it's also this other kind of zoning established by a separate document on a separate date. So it allows a higher level of detail and historicity in our zoning, which was something people have asked for. The same way we offer that with annexations and parcels and all that. This is the last tab in the change record, and then we can just focus on questions. Actually, it's not really showing change necessarily. You know what? No, we'll ignore the new parcels tab. That's just a purpose-built thing for other folks. Let's see.
So we do have some questions, Josh. Nancy, hi Nancy, I didn't know you were here. So Nancy has a couple questions. One, are you mapping and managing easements or any any limited interests in property, like rights of way as well as easements? And Megan's already answered that we do deeded rights of way only, no easements, no partial interests in property. Nancy followed that up with, do you see a need for partial interest easements in the future?
I think they'd be interesting to have, but we haven't run into any situations where we at the county needed those. The easements are usually specific to a utility company or temporary construction from a highway department, or it's of interest to the planning group at whatever incorporated body that they happen to fall in. We haven't really needed to track them. And some of them are just, time bound or ephemeral, and it's just hasn't been, it's not something that was tracked before I started at the department, and we haven't seen a great need to, oh, look at that, Pro just crashed out of nowhere, and I'm not even using it. Thanks, Esri. Just a good reminder of how things work around here. That's fun.
I also noticed you're still using 2.9, is that correct?
Yeah, we haven't gotten around to upgrading our portal to 11 yet. And there's just a little bit more latency accessing a feature service from 3 than there is from 2.9.
Interesting.
Yeah, and I don't know if that's just an us thing and if that'll even be resolved if we upgrade to 11, but it was just enough of a delay in editing operations that it was getting in the way of doing good work. So we're just sitting
and just to share, and I like all the work that they've done in 3.0, but I also know that it might be best to just sort of hold off. I don't think there's any overwhelming features that are only available in 3 that you can't do in 2.9 at the moment. Yeah, I agree. We also have a question from Mark.
Yeah.
What happens to parcels that are split several times on the before and after dashboard?
You just see them multiple times. But when we process things and the way that we do everything based on individual records. So let me see if we can find a townhome. They'd all be sort of in sequence. So if a parcel is split, it creates child parcels. Really, I guess another way to put it is the way we process things, that never happens. Once a
Okay.
parcel's split, it's retired. If it's splitting multiple times, that really means one of its child parcels is getting split in that successive transaction, and that would be a separate record. You know, if something is somehow getting split more than once in a single record, I kind of feel like that means I'm processing something strangely.
Okay.
But let's see, I think if we do Bristol or Oswego, we'll get
So
some.
I have another question while you're at this, and this came from the chat window. So you have in here mostly you're reporting changes that have occurred and have occurred to other people, and allowing, for example, the appraisers and such to review these, to look at them. Do you have any sort of operational components on here where maybe you have them approve or disapprove one of these changes, or?
No, we have a totally separate workflow for everything that leads up to the parcel split. And that thing, I'd show you, but it's like it's a whole other ball of wax, right? But that is where other departments and individuals have the opportunity to provide input, leave remarks, approve or reject things. So by the time it gets to the parcel fabric, that's actually one of the last steps in our workflow. All the stuff leading up to that makes sure that this is good to go.
Okay.
So we have a different separate process. If I told you all about it, it's like we use data expressions in dashboards, like to a degree that is, I love it, but it's a lot to explain. But
Well, we may have to bring you back for that.
well, it's
eventually
about the parcel fabric at that point, but
yeah. Well, this isn't our workshops are not just the parcel fabric, it's RTS Pro and all that technology. So we might have to bring you back, Josh.
you know, if you wanna peek at it, I won't show you the dashboard because it takes a bit to load. If anyone here has used data expressions, you know, if you have one of those 4 feature in feature set, those loops can take a while, but it's my workflow expressions. But we have this, I'm pretty proud of it. This expression here, this is the longest arcade expression I've ever written. Just shy of 450 with lots of comments.
Well, I was going to say, you've commented well, so you documented it well.
But this thing takes a hosted layer of recorded documents that is synchronized with our recorder's website. And it tracks this multi-table thing of different approvals and remarks and stuff. It's pretty neat. But anyway, so back to the original question though, is when it gets to this part where it's at the change record, we know that all the ducks are in a row and everything has been looked at that needs to be, and everyone's okay with it.
So Josh, we're coming up on an hour right now, and I know you and I talked, and you were questioning whether you could finish it up in an hour. I think you've pretty much done it. So if you don't mind, maybe we cut it off now and let and open up the mics and see if anyone has any questions. Would you mind that?
No, not at all. That's great.
Okay, so again, anybody that's in here, you can either put it in a chat window or open up your mic and go ahead and feel free to ask Josh a question. Please. I'm very thankful for Josh and Megan for allowing us to get a glimpse in what you're doing there.
Hi, I have a question. This is Kelly.
Hi.
I have a question regarding your Python code, actually. Because I noticed you were referencing your feature services, the parcel feature service to extract data or, whatever. I was wondering, is it and maybe this is my naivete, but do you recommend doing that moreover than, say, connecting, through your Python script directly to your SDE database?
Yes, I do. Partly because if you query a feature service, or if you query the database directly and it has branch versioning, that is a beastly SQL expression to actually grab the latest version that isn't deleted from default. So, I mean, if it didn't have branch versioning, I probably wouldn't be averse to it. But I like going through the feature service because honestly, like I could open this up, and if I went back to it, I could run it right now, even though I'm at the Plano Public Library and I am not in the county network and I am not at my normal workstation. I could run the same script because I authenticate with the portal as opposed to having direct access to the database. So I don't know how it would perform from the library, and it's an open network, so I don't want to do it. But the point is, like, having it run through Python, I have in the past run those update scripts from my Linux machine at home or from a headless cloud machine because I can do that. I don't need anything but access to the portal and proper authentication. So I like that. That makes it so that if one machine fails, I don't even have to be in the same subnet. I can get the code running on another machine and make sure things are still syncing properly. Also, I couldn't quite get it to work right. I don't know if it was I had the wrong version of the ArcGIS library or it's just not up to date on the portal side yet. But when you access something through a feature layer collection, you're supposed to be able to, I think the method is called extract changes. I could never get that to work, but I know that's something that's supposed to work. So, so there are other things that you gain from being able to query the service directly. Also just, using the ArcGIS Python API as opposed to just raw SQL. I just query it straight into a data frame. I know you can do that with pandas and GeoPandas and whatnot. I think you can even just do that from, well, but anyway, so I like the feature service version. We try to keep everything accessible to us because we are a hybrid office. We work remotely a lot of the time. And so, it's just one less thing to juggle if I don't have to worry about VPNs and stuff. And frankly, I know this is maybe not a popular method among other county GIS groups, but except for the Parcel Fabric, we don't have anything in SDE. It's all hosted layers because there's, aside from the Parcel Fabric, there's nothing we're doing that requires the advanced functionality or precision of an SDE. It's just representational shapes. So we just move everything to hosted layers as much as possible so that so it doesn't really matter where we're accessing it from.
Interesting.
Okay,
Good
thank
question.
you.
Yeah, good question, Kelly. So Josh, that brings up another question. So to what extent, other than the Parcel Fabric, are you using attribute rules?
Right now, not really at all. And that is because attribute rules are not, are they in 11? I don't think they are for Portal.
They are not. Well,
No,
in order
they're-
to get the attribute rule to work, you have to have, it has to be branch versioned, and you have to set version management up in order for it to go and work correctly. Yeah.
That's right. The attribute rules aren't even in ArcGIS Online yet.
Yeah.
I have a handful of cases where I'd love to have an attribute rule, but to use a phrase that you gifted us, Frank, the juice just isn't worth the squeeze, I like having it in the hosted layers for the ease of maintaining and managing stuff like domains and view layers, and just for the better performance that we get. If I had something that required an attribute rule, honestly, most of those are pretty simple calculations. And I would just as soon have a Python script run every 5 minutes on AWS Lambda or something. You know, a lot of the things that attribute rules are good for, it's that like immediate calculate of some field and using spatial components of related layers. I like that, but we just don't have the layers that demand that kind of functionality. Most people that are using our data, they're happy that we update our stuff every night. So having it update right when we make the edit, nobody's really looking for that. So
Interesting. One more thing that you reminded me of was this whole concept of really utilizing hosted layers and minimizing SDE and even file geodatabase or the geodatabase, the enterprise geodatabase. Is that one of the things that I'm trying to convince people of, especially in small to mid-sized organizations, is that really look hard at utilizing hosted services as much as possible, not bringing it on-prem. Because the reality is most of the things you want to do is basically just serving this out and controlling it, and that's it. And it's not going to, the data up there is not going to be very dynamic. It's mostly for publication and consumption. Right. And and so often, you know, having to go and have the ELA and the accounts and all of the overhead set up to have it on premises is prohibitive on there. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me of that again. Yeah.
Hey, our workflow finished loading. If anyone's on here who wanted to see it, it's a lot, but you know, we've got like a document. The assessor says something, we can review it, update its status. It moves over to someone else's dashboard and they do something and they send it back. And then we have a document that we can do stuff with and update it. And then, you know, we can open up the document directly. This is where people approve stuff. So there's a separate dashboard for our assessor's office, a separate dashboard for the treasurer and clerk. And then we've got a quality control page where one of the fun things with attribute expressions is you can use the current username as a parameter. And so when I say, okay, this thing, I'll go in and I say, I processed it, took me 45 minutes, I processed it, it's closed now. I'm not gonna click submit, but you know, if I did this and submitted it, I can make it so that my quality control tab, which that'll take its own time to load, will filter out things that I processed. So I don't even have the option of clearing things that I did. I only see other people's stuff. And I know there's data reviewer and things like that, but we needed stuff that our other departments could get at.
So Josh, you're going to absolutely blow my mind if you tell me you're doing all of this with hosted services.
Absolutely.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
And I know there was that ridiculous arcade expression. I'm fully aware that what we're doing with our workflow could probably use a few view layers in a traditional SQL database, but I didn't want to turn on a database machine just for one workflow. And frankly, once I figured out the logic of the expression and set up the forms, it's totally fine.
Wow.
So it's all just one big old service. Well, actually, I don't have to show you that. I can just show you, like, you know, everything relates through tables. So I can take something that's on hold, and I can see. Or actually, let's take something that's in processing. I can just look and see, you know, remarks, details. Here's the pin. Treasurer reviewed it. Clerk hasn't reviewed it, so that's why it's being held up. I can look at things that are on hold. And because it's a hosted layer, it has attachments, so I can see, someone calls in and they say, this is my deed, why did it get rejected? I can see it took Megan 10 minutes to review it, and these were her findings. So
Oh my gosh.
I can just send people a link to that letter if they don't have it. Or I can say, oh, you know what? I took a second look at it and it's actually good. I disagree with Megan. You can just add a new review right from here, and then it'll show up as a second entry in that list. And the most recent one takes precedence over the prior ones with respect to getting it through the next stage. So
Josh, I am absolutely amazed by what you and Megan have done here. We do have one more question in the chat window.
yeah,
And that is, does all of this require credits?
no.
No.
This is all on Portal. So we don't use ArcGIS Online really for anything. ArcGIS Online is, I joke, ArcGIS Online is our dev environment. That's where I just throw layers to screw around with stuff. And then Portal is production.
Yes.
But no, since it's all on our own machines, we don't have to pay Esri any credits for any of this. It's just our own compute time. And the development time of setting this thing up. Yeah, so it's running all the time. Anytime someone wants to come in and check on the workflow, and it's, being an important thing, it's all user authenticated so that you can't just log in as a
Right.
public, screw something up. But yeah, no credits here.
Wow. All right. Well, listen, I can sit here and we could talk for another hour, but I
Yeah.
think we're going to cut this off. All
Okay.
right. And hang around, because we're going to stop sharing and we just go open up everybody's webcam and talk for a little bit more, but we're going to stop the recording. So let me go and cut this out and go back here and just thank everybody for coming and participating. This was a great presentation. Thank you, Josh and Megan. Thank you for sharing, and we'll go from there. All right. And I'm going to invite you back again. I can tell we're going to talk some more. All right. Thanks again. Bye. Thanks for attending, and we hope you enjoyed this workshop. If you have questions, would like some more details about anything we discussed during this workshop, or if you or anyone at your organization would like information about training, support, or ways in which we can help you with your GIS needs, please contact me at frank@pandaconsulting.com or call me at 561-691-3277, and we can discuss how we can help you with your needs.